Welcome to Fight Club 24/7. My name's Johnny Rashman. Right, let's get straight into it. Boxing was cancelled this weekend in the UK. Right. First of all, what I want to say, it's extremely sad with the Queen passing away. Right? Extremely sad. It's a massive event for the UK. It's a time of change. It's a time of uncertainty, and that had to be respected. Am I a royalist? Yeah, I am to an extent. I mean, I don't have pictures of the royals in my house, but I appreciate the monarchy, right? It's part of the UK's customs and traditions, and the Queen was iconic. She was everything that's good about the UK, right? So that did have to be respected. However, common sense should have prevailed. It should have prevailed, and now hindsight's a good thing. Looking back on Monday, I can see what's transpired over the weekend and I can give my opinion. But there needed to be some leadership shown. The decision was with the British Boxing Board of Control. Now, if you're watching from a different country, I'll explain who they are. They govern UK boxing, right? So in America, for every state, you'll have an athletic department, a state commission. So in Las Vegas, you'll have the Las Vegas, Nevada Athletic Commission, and in New York you'll have the New York Athletic Commission. In England you just have the British Boxing Board of Control. It was up to them whether boxing was going to stay on or whether it was going to be cancelled. Now, I think it's very important to highlight that the British Boxing Board of Control were in a very difficult position. You've got to sympathise with them, right? The sad news came in about the Queen passing away Thursday evening, right? We didn't get government guidance whether sports events can go on till Friday morning. The boxing show with Shields and Marshall was on Saturday, literally hours away. So they were in a difficult position. They were scrambling around. They were in a difficult position. However, they got it wrong. They made a bad decision. It was wrong, it was incorrect, however you want to say it. And I'll explain to you why. The statement that came out on Friday, I think we got the news about 2-3 o'clock that the show, that Shields and Marshall was cancelled and that everything in the UK, all shows were going to be cancelled. We got a statement from the British Boxing Board of Control saying, out of respect to Her Majesty the Queen, everything's going to be cancelled. They're going to respect the mourning process and all this. Now, I've got to be completely honest with you. I do not believe that was the sole reason why boxing got cancelled this weekend. I don't believe it. Now, the timeline of events suggests this. The weigh-in kept being pushed back from 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock. You had Shields and Marshall and fighters on the undercard, didn't know when they were going to weigh in. It wasn't open to the public. It was on, it wasn't. So clearly they were trying to discuss something, right? And the fact that we got the news at about 2-3 o'clock suggests they were trying to keep it on. On Friday morning, there was government guidance basically saying that all sporting events can continue, but it's up to the sporting bodies. So it wasn't stone cold that every single sporting event had to be cancelled, because if it was, then you just have to deal with it. Yes, it's upsetting and it's frustrating for fighters, but what can you do? You just get on with it. But it wasn't. It was up to the sporting entities. Now, football got cancelled. Okay, fine. They made a decision pretty early on Friday, around, 10 a.m, 11 a.m. So that was it. Football's cancelled. So why was boxing waiting until 3 o'clock? Why? I'll tell you why. I think the reason Shields and Marshall wasn't on, I think it was logistical issues. I really do. You've got to understand there must have been hundreds of thousands of people coming to London this weekend. The fight was in London, right? So that's going to put a strain on ambulance services, police resources. So I think they were trying to find out if they can put this event on, if there was enough police, if there was enough ambulance. Because you're talking about a 20,000 seater arena with a boxing fight, you know. Plus, with everyone coming to the UK to pay their condolences to the Queen, I think that's what they were trying to work out, right? And I think what they should have done is, once they realised that logistically that fight couldn't happen, they should have just cancelled that fight. Yes, it's upsetting, it's frustrating, and it's a problem for fighters, because sometimes people think, oh, they can fight in 6 weeks' time, but they can't. Literally, fighters are zoned into one day, right? The strength and conditioning coaches, your trainers, the body clock, everything is geared to peak on that day of fight night. Not the day after, not the day before, the day of fight night. So anything that derails that, it could be a bad meal, it could be a few days off training, anything, especially with weight making, can be a major problem. So now the fighters are going to have to restart again, especially Shields and Marshall, right? It's an absolute nightmare. But they're at the upper echelons of boxing, right? They're not on the small hall show. So they'll fight again in 6 weeks. What the British Boxing Board of Control should have done is left all the remaining shows on that aren't in London, that aren't going to put a strain on police resources. Because let me tell you something, the British Boxing Board of Control, their job, right, is to put their fighters, their managers, their promoters, anyone who pays a licensing fee first. No matter what. No matter what. Right? And I don't believe they did this weekend. Right? Small hall shows and small hall boxing, I can't tell you how much they rely on ticket sales, on people going to the event. It's their heartbeat, right? You've got fighters living from paycheck to paycheck. The UK is a mess at the moment. We're in uncertain times, cost of living crisis, just like the rest of the world, right? So people are struggling to put food on the table, and boxers, they're relying on that paycheck. They've got mortgages to pay. They've got families to feed. Now, yes, Shields and Marshall can fight again in 6 weeks, but I'm talking about the shows lower down the food chain, right? The small hall shows, that food's been ordered, that people are working on, that they won't get their money back, and they can't afford it. Right, so that should have been in the Board of Control's mind. Never mind Shields and Marshall. Yes, that was sad and it was frustrating for the fans and everyone who was going. The amount of DMs I was getting off people asking for updates, people who booked hotels, people didn't know if they should go down. We were all on social media refreshing our feed every second. I was getting updates from people who were there. It was just an absolute shambles towards the end, right? But I don't think small hall boxing was the centre of anything. I just think it was left. I just think, right, we can't put Shields and Marshall on, we'll just cancel anything. Wrong decision. It just wasn't the right decision. You've got to understand, yes, people may say boxing's entertainment, it's sports entertainment. Yes, for fans, for fighters, trainers, managers and promoters, it's their 9 to 5, it's their job. Right, if you were to cancel everyone's work this week, and if the government said, right, it's a mourning process of 10 days, no one can work and you're not getting paid, there'd be riots. There'd be absolute riots, right? So it's not okay to do that for boxing. And to see cricket and rugby continue, that was a kick in the face. It was an absolute kick in the face, because if every sport's not going on, you can deal with that, right? Either those sports had no respect for the protocol or boxing made a bad decision. And I believe it's the latter. Boxing made a bad decision, because the ramifications of this hurts people. It does. It's not just the case of the big shows of the Shields and Marshall. It's lower down the food chain, right? Let me show you some transcripts from an interview. This is the British Boxing Board of Control speaking to the WBA. It was Robert Smith, the head of it. I think this was about 8 years ago, this interview. And if you look at some of the words that he uses, he basically says boxers, managers, promoters, master of ceremonies, they all pay a licensing fee, which pay for their office, which pay for their job, basically. So anyone who pays a fee has a say in how the sport was run. Did they have a say this weekend? No. Now, yes, I get it. Time was against everyone, right? And they were scrambling around, calling people, trying to sort things out. But surely you should have spoken to some managers, promoters, and should have said, right, guys, what do you think the right thing is to do? Could you imagine the scenes in shows up and down the country with the national anthem going on, right? Like in cricket and rugby. People could have filmed that, could have hashtag God Save the Queen. It would have been a beautiful memorial, you know. Boxing would have paid their respects in its own way, and I think there was a chance missed with that. And you've got to understand, this is money that these fighters, promoters, media guys, anyone who's involved in the shows won't get back. It just wasn't the right time at the moment to cancel shows, right? Boxing is underinvested as it is. The pandemic taught you this. A lot of sports were getting grants, we're getting loans. Boxing got nothing, right? It doesn't get the investment other sports does. So you have to look at it like that. It's fighters train differently. They're not on salaries like cricket, rugby and all these other sports. So that should have been in the border control's mind, right? Not making statements, political statements in this. And yes, look, it's upsetting about the Queen and it's a massive event, right? Believe me, it is. Right? I'm all for respecting the protocol. But when the government guidance came out and said, look, you can put sporting shows on, that should have been it. The decision should have been made to keep it on. Shields and Marshall should have been different. You shouldn't have kept that. You shouldn't have put that in the same bracket as all the other shows, right? If that show logistically couldn't be put on, come out and say it. We can't put it on. There's too many, we've just not got the police resources. No one would have said anything, right? But to cancel boxing up and down the country just wasn't the right decision, and people in the game will tell you this, right? And if you look at the interviews over the weekend, everyone's saying the same thing, right? So no one was consulted, I don't believe. Was the promoters consulted? Was the managers? And like I said, I'm not talking about just Shields and Marshall, the small hall shows. Who was looking after them? Because for me, they didn't get a fair shake, and I'm sorry, right? They should be just as important, if not more important, than the bigger shows, because these guys are relying on this money. This is their job. This is their job. And to take that away for essentially no reason, right? Yes, as I say, respect the protocol, right? But the government came out and said sporting shows can continue. Cricket and rugby, how dare they continue and boxing can't? What does that tell you? It just wasn't right. It wasn't right. And as I say, I do have sympathy for the board. They were in a difficult position. But a lot of people have lost money that they can't afford to lose. Especially in the time we're in at the moment. They can't afford to lose. They can't get it back. And I hope the board does something. I hope maybe, I don't know what they can do, but I hope they do something. Because it's not fair for all these shows to lose money. You've got to understand, small horse shows are the heartbeat of boxing. Without them, there'd be no pro boxing. There'd be nothing. Right? Yes, we all watch the big shows, but up and down the country, every week you have promoters, managers, matchmakers, right? Everyone involved, right? Putting on small horse shows that breed the next talent, right? Without them, boxing in this country would die, right? Now, yes, I believe it was the border control's fault, but they do great things, right? It's easy to hammer them all the time. Sometimes it's justifiable, especially with the judges, right? I think they get it wrong how they treat the judges. And my problem with the border control is no one governs them. They make their own decisions, and if they get it wrong, they get it wrong. It doesn't make a difference. You have no one to answer to, right? But they do things great. The medical facilities that's on offer is second to none, right? It's the best in the world, right? We very rarely get injuries, and yes, unfortunately, it's sad and people have passed away, but it's not the norm. So the border control do a great job in that respect. But for me, they didn't have the fighters' best interest at heart this weekend, and that is their job. We pay them a licensing fee. Well, not me myself, but the people in the game, right? And it says in that interview, people who pay a fee has a voice. No one had a voice this weekend. Wasn't right. Bad decision. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with what I say? Do you think Shields and Marshall got cancelled because out of respect, or do you just think they just couldn't put the fight on? Let me know your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know.